Analysis of Next to Of Course God America I by E. Cummings for the AQA GCSE Literature exam. Next to Of Course God America I. Next to of course God, America, I love you, land of the pilgrims, and so forth, though say can you see by the dawns early my country 'tis of centuries come and go, and are no more, what of it we should worry in every language, even deaf and dumb, thy sons acclaim your glorious name, by Gari, by Jingo, by G, by gosh, by gum, why talk of beauty, what could be more beautiful, and these heroic happy dead, who rush like lions to the rawing slaughter, they did not stop to think, they died instead, then shall the voice of liberty be mute? He spoke, and drank rapidly a glass of water. Okay, so the subject, we are analysing this as we have done with all the others, with FLIRTS, form, language, imagery, rhythm, rhyme, tone, and subject, and we start with subject. The poem is a satire, okay? It's taking the mickey, it's using it's using humour to make a serious point, so it's a satire on political arrogance and the exploitation of patriotism, of nationalism, to justify conflict. Now the form, I've included the whole poem there, and as you may have seen, it is a sonnet, okay? It's 14 lines, so it's written as a sonnet. There's very little punctuation, it's all in lowercase, well, mainly lowercase, and it has an unusual grammar. There are two voices, as you probably heard in my reading of the poem. So there's the first person, American politician, and then the second is the third person. It's written in the third person, and it's an observer of this speech. Now, the sonnet form is traditionally a love poem. It's normally dedicated to someone or something, and it has been used as in patriotic poetry before. Famously by Rupert Brooke in The Soldier, which I've mentioned in one of my previous videos. Here the poet Cummings has chosen it to reflect the subject of patriotism, a love of one's country, a love of one's nation. However, he has played about with the form, and this is something that Cummings was quite known for. He uses traditional forms but then mixes them up. He kind of changes them around, and it's not really a sonnet in the strictest sense. Now, this distortion of the sonnet form, this playing about with it, shows how patriotism has a corrupting effect. It has a distorting effect, certainly on the speaker, and it has kind of skewed their perspective on war. Now, the lack of punctuation, unusual grammar, means that it is a difficult poem to read. When I read it out, I had to take a long breath to read that whole speech in one, without pause. And I think it's taken me about 4 or 5 times to get it right. This shows how Cummings is critical of the first speaker's message, so this politician's message, and also that it's difficult to comprehend. It's difficult to comprehend how nationalism, how patriotism can be used to justify conflict. The lowercase throughout the poem belittles the themes of nationalism that are expressed by the speaker. The two voices shows that the first voice is a political speaker. It's a political speech, and this allows the second speaker, perhaps the voice of the poet, but it also allows the reader as well to distance themselves from the rest of the poem, from that central message. And this final line, it contrasts with the speech, the rest of the poem. Now, language, we have a prevalence of grandiose language: God, America, glorious, heroic, liberty, and there are lots of cliches, these heroic happy dead, and there are words merged, so deaf and dumb, as there are some of the images are merged, as we will see as well, and lines unfinished. Now, the poem is littered, and littered is a good metaphor there, because the speaker is literally just throwing away or throwing out these themes of nationalism and patriotism, throwing them out as if they don't really mean anything to him. He's just using them. The lines are made up of cliches. Cliches are kind of phrases and sayings that we use, that become part of our speech. but it just shows really how little thought has been put into it by this speaker. Just coming out with cliches. Politicians do it all the time. Cliches and sound bites. That really shows that there's no thought. It's rather vague, and these cliches, they contrast with the grand themes expressed and show how there is actually little value or meaning in this speech. The merged words deaf and dumb, and the use of enjambment, which I will talk about later. The speaker is rushing to get his speech out. There's no thought. He's just trying to get through it. And there in the final line, he rapidly drinks a glass of water because it's kind of it's been a rush to get it out, and it's kind of taken it out of him. The and so forth follows after, in the second line, follows after the themes of God and America and the central speaker, the I, and it's almost dismissive of these themes. The imagery, we have lyrics from two patriotic songs. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light, and my country 'tis of thee I sing. There's lots of intertextuality, so rush like lions to the roaring slaughter. Lots of intertextuality, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, the references to the patriotic song, one of them is the national anthem, Oh Say Can You See by the Dawn's Early Light, create this sense of nationalist pride in the poem. So it immediately identifies the theme of patriotism. However, because Cummings has merged them together and they flow into each other, the lines and their message are incomplete. There's no real meaning to them, and they're just being used, like with the cliches when we looked at language, for rhetorical purposes. The speaker is just throwing them out just to get a message across. So they lose their depth, they lose their value. The intertextuality. Now, intertextuality means that Cummings is referring to other texts. He's alluding to other texts. So again, he's kind of showing how the speaker is unable to come up with their own thoughts or with their own message. The line like lions to the roaring slaughter is a reference to a poem by Percy Shelley, who was a romantic poet in the 19th century, the early 19th century, called The Mask of Anarchy, and the line is rise like lions after slumber, which was engaging. It was engaging people in this fight, asking them to stand up to their beliefs. So it was very much a call to war, so to speak. And but again, Cummings has used this and changed it around, and referencing that, showing how the speaker is unable to come up with their own thoughts, their own ideals, their own ideology and principles. The speech, therefore, is not delivered with conviction, but it is a patchwork of worn out and overused phrases and cliches. Now, the rhythm and rhyme, there's lots of enjambment. All of the lines in the speech flow into one another. There is an irregular meter, so it's not all like a sonic form would be iambic pentameter. Not all of the lines are iambic pentameter. And there's the rhyme scheme: A B A B, C D C D, E F G, F E G. Okay, so the enjambment adds to this fast and rush pace. Remember, enjambment means there's no punctuation at the end of a line, so each line flows in, and again, even within the lines, lines of songs and flow into each other. The words are rushed, and it highlights how there is a lack of thought that has gone into the speech. The irregular meter and the rhyme scheme further emphasizes this distortion of the sonnet form. He's not sticking to the traditional sonnet form. The rhyme scheme starts off with the traditional Shakespearean sonnet: A B A B, C D C D, E F G G. That would be a Shakespearean sonnet. However, in the final 6 lines, he breaks away from that. So we have the A B A B, C D C D, so the 2 quatrains, but then he goes E F G, F E G, and that's a very unusual rhyming pattern. It's not natural. You can't pick out the rhymes very easily, and distorting this sonnet form, distorting this rhyme scheme, again reflects the corrupted message and indeed the distorted perspective, I suppose, of the speaker. Now the tone. Well, the poem is a satire, and it satirises the grand themes, and it's critical of this patriotic arrogance and this political arrogance, so to speak. Now, at the end of the speech, there is a question. Questions the silent acceptance of these nationalist values. So, the poem explores and satirises, takes the mickey out of the arrogance and pride of three central concepts: God, nationalism, and the self. So next to, of course, God, America, I. They all come together in that one line next to each other. God, America, I. Such arrogance, assuming moral and military superiority, can lead to disaster. There's a comma missing in that sentence. See if you can identify where it should go. So this arrogance and this assumption that we have a moral high ground and that we are also military superior can lead to disaster. It did so in the First World War, where two kind of superpowers met in conflict, and it completely destroyed them. And then America emerged out of the First World War as the superpower of the 20th century. And Cummings was quite keen for this not to, America not to make the same mistakes as Britain and Germany did in the early part of the 20th century. So the poem criticises these values and their negative and debilitating effect, their destructive effect on a country. Line 13, so the final line of the speech: then shall the voice of liberty be mute. Liberty means freedom, and mute means quiet, silent. It's just that people are too willing to accept these values, and instead of speaking out, we just accept them. And I think the poet Cummings is urging us, the reader, that we shouldn't be passive observers. We shouldn't sit and listen to these ridiculous speeches, but instead we should speak out, particularly in matters of war and conflict.